you doing?
Doing well. I'm still trying to recover and get back from vacation.
Yeah. Good evening. I would like to call the July 8th, 2024 New Albany Plain Local Board of Education meeting to order. Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. McClellan,
Here.
Mr. Newman,
Here.
Ms. Fuller. Here. President Kellogg.
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Board members have had the opportunity to review the minutes from our June 10th and June 24th, 2024 regular Board of Education meetings. May I have a motion and a second to approve these meeting minutes?
So moved. Second.
Mr. McClellan and Mr. Wilson. Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. McClellan,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Ms. Fuller. Yes. Vice President Newman.
Yes.
President Kellogg.
Yes, and the motion passes. Superintendent Sawyers, are there any additions or corrections to tonight's agenda?
None, thank you.
With none, may I have a motion and a second to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Mr. Newmoff and Ms. Fuller. Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Vice President Newman.
Yes.
Ms. Fuller. Yes. Mr. McClellan.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
President Kellogg.
Yes, and the motion carries. Now for communications to the board, beginning with superintendent items. Superintendent Sawyers.
President Kalinowski, member of the Board of Education. Tonight, we're going to focus on updates to the campus master plan. I'm going to invite Michael Dingeldine to come to the podium as one of the architects that's involved with us from Shore, CDA, and Harrison Planning Group. I'm going to share my screen, so give me just a second. Get there. So in the campus master plan, since your last Board of Education meeting, we've continued our work with the architects and discussions. We're going to focus on only one project this evening that has had an update to it since our last meeting, and then I'm going to switch and go straight into what will become the summary chart, and then we'll talk about it in general. But based upon continued conversations with the architects, we did update Project B for the concept for the new school. As you recall from the last Board of Education meeting, we incorporated the new wing because the new wing was cheaper construction-wise per square foot than the renovation that was proposed at the Early Learning Center. So we added the first floor, but then based upon continued conversations, have had some discussions about the preliminary cost savings that could be possible if the facade or exterior of the building would change to not be the traditional brick Jeffersonian looking building that's everywhere else on our school campus with the white columns and the front brick and the main entrance. One of the discussions that led to that conversation was a meeting with the New Albany company, and then subsequent thereafter conversations with the city and potentially some beginning conversations with the Architectural Review Board to look at the concept of what would become white batten board metal looking facade, similar to what you see at the Plain Township Pool and the Wexner Pavilion, because it's all on that corner. So that entire corner would have the white look, much like we do in our current buildings in relationship to our gymnasium spaces. So that was looked at from a cost perspective from the architects, and the initial cost savings came back just over $1 million, round numbers. So we've incorporated that into the concept tonight just to understand its implications into recommendations we're going to give you this evening on options for the Board of Education to move forward with the requirements under Ohio Revised Code that would lead to the potential for a bond issue. The rest of the master plan has remained unchanged. So we didn't change anything else related to the school other than looking at potentially the exterior design. Again, it's conceptual. We have not built the building. We haven't designed the building. We haven't picked materials, none of that. We just wanted to know the value of what would it cost differently if in fact we didn't do the traditional brick look on the outside that all of our other buildings have because of the corner that it would be represented on. So to that end, we then took that information and translated it into what would become project options for the Board of Education. So Patrick has these for people that are in the audience, and he'll share them so that you can see them, because I know it's going to be difficult to see on the screen. Board members, you have this in your packets for option number 1, option number 2. We're going to differentiate between the two. That'll lead to tonight's conversation about everything else related to finances associated to the projections for the campus master plan. So we're going to start first with option number 1 that's being presented based upon the continued work with the architects and then work that Becky, Lori, Ken, and I have done in the interim to try to look at projects and how we would group them based upon continued feedback and the structures of what the projects could become. So first, we have restructured PI. We took the annex demolition site improvements at the primary school and the maintenance storage facility out of phase 2 of the bond issue, placed them into PI. We left the McCoy storage for theater, the high school stadium improvements, the multi-purpose practice fields becoming grass only for soil, grass, irrigation, and fencing, the high school gymnasium and locker room repairs, middle school gymnasium locker room, and the middle school locker room renovation specifically, and now total $10,321,300 as potential to come out of the permanent improvement fund for potential usage. We've moved the annex, the primary school, and the site improvements for the maintenance storage facility into PI, knowing that we'll control the timeline. And you see in my notes the escalators. So when we built in the escalators all the way out to 2028, there was a significant increase in total cost for the projects. So we would control the projects differently by using PI. It wouldn't necessarily all be delayed to 2028. Clearly, they have to happen in a phased-in approach, but we basically, through the cost savings we've had year over year within the school district as part of our continuous improvement plan goal, and then additional cost savings dominantly through unfilled vacancy, we've transferred some money into the permanent improvement fund that we believe can fulfill those requests in a different timeline. The partner column on this version is 0, so there is no partnership contribution. This assumes all school projects. In phase 1, beginning with November 2024, for the first 3 years of what would be projected to be the construction on the school's campus, we would do the exterior bus lane at the Early Learning Center, the new school building, and again, this number incorporates the change in the facade. Everything associated to the new school, including the addition of the wing that would now house up to 1,200 students as part of phase 1 for $58,277,600 is the probable cost estimate based upon the work with the architects. Again, it's an estimate. None of this has gone out for bid. Swickard Woods Boulevard developments for $2.8 million. That includes the intersection at Boder Road and then all site improvements at the new school and Swickard Woods Boulevard specifically. The high school tech hub has been moved back into phase 1 as part of total project. And then the middle school football stadium would stay as part of phase 1 as it was originally projected. And then in this example, for option number 1, the relocation of the high school baseball and softball fields would continue to be accounted for, because if we displace the fields, we have to replace them in kind, which would be our intent. So that is the estimate for actually installing those fields currently off property, which we will also talk about tonight. And then the new transportation facility, there was additional conversations. We've had some discussions preliminary with Plain Township, specifically about a joint site that could be not only for school transportation purposes, but also a potential solution in the future for Plain Township Fire Department for a substation. So the property would be such that it would have the potential to do both the school transportation center and a future substation that would be needed at some point within the community based upon continued growth and the decisions that would be made by the Plain Township trustees. So right now in this version on option number 1, we're at $90,260,400. Your first phase cannot exceed 90 million. We are confident we can value engineer $260,000 plus change out of the total cost that's projected in phase 1 to basically make it the $90 million project. In phase 2, we cannot exceed the $60 million marker. There have been no changes to phase 2 other than the price escalations. So we added the escalators for future construction costs if those would occur in 2028. So you can see the projects did go up and increase for total cost because they're projected to be done in 2028. So the architects did go through and add cost escalation based upon future construction costs, based upon their discussions with the marketplace. Mike, is that fair?
That's all fair.
So right now we're sitting at $50 million projected in phase 2, and then the do not do column until there's other community partnerships or additional funding that can become available have stayed the same. That list has not changed since its original proposal to the Board of Education. So for option number 1, it would mean a $150 million maximum project that would require 0.55 new mills. So Becky will walk through millage after we talk about the projects for you, because we're kind of blending all these topics together because it's going to lead to board action items later in the agenda. So we're kind of just doing these together to talk about them in a total package. So before I switch from project number 1, are there any questions about the $150 million maximum project and what we would say we're currently projecting for PI, November issue for phase 1 for years 1 through 3, and a November issue for phase 2, years 4 through 6, that results in a 0.55 mil tax increase with the 1.45 roll off of the community authority.
Go ahead.
Michael, I have a question about the middle school stadium improvements. So we're still planning on doing a track there. Is that really necessary, given we have the track in high school? I'm not aware, perhaps there are conflicts in track meets, but it's one of those surfaces that, absent being used for track, doesn't really have a lot of other use. But I'm not sure what the value of that is.
So Mike, do you know what the price tag of the track was?
Surface itself is, well, I guess you're talking about the whole track, it's the base and the surface. I want to say it's 300,000.
Yeah, so that's something we can continue to look at, Mr. Wilson. There is a community benefit because people actually do come to the stadium and walk on the track. When it's closed, they can't do that. They do the same thing in the bleachers. We have people that come and run the bleachers. So this would be an additional opportunity for that as well. It gives the middle school a home for track, so the conflicts wouldn't be the same for home versus away. So it could actually increase capacity and opportunity for kids to have access to both locations. We do use the middle school stadium currently for the shot put and the discus. So there is an overlap between the two stadiums currently for the types of events that happen. But that's something we can continue to look at. But again, in the total project cost, it's $300,000 is the estimate for the 6 lanes that we have proposed.
Right. I guess my follow-on question to that was, given that we've decided to put natural grass surface on those upper fields, what would the cost savings be if we went to grass in the middle school stadium?
Mike, do you know the number? I don't. We'd have to get it.
It's about $1 million for the surface, and then there's some drainage costs. So I'm going to say 1.3. But you would not get all that back by going to a grass or irrigated surface. Right?
So the turf cost is 1.3
Surface about
roughly.
1. That includes the entire interior where the track and field events are as well. Right?
And part of the logic, though, is why we went forward with the track or the middle school stadium as it was presented was that we actually changed the grass fields at the top so that we wouldn't incur the additional cost in the future for turf replacement. We feel that grass can be sufficient in that area By actually putting the turf in the middle school, we expand our availability and usage for all events across all students in grades 7 through 12. So we'd actually have another high school regulation interscholastic size field that would be turf that could be used both for practice when it's not used for competition, but actually increase competition use, even during inclement weather, because that's typically the problem with the middle school stadium. Once the inclement weather comes, depending on the season, some of those events cannot happen there, so we reschedule them around the best of our ability to either go away or to be in the high school stadium if it would be available.
Right. That's one of the foremost benefits of it is that early season access. Okay, thanks.
You're not saving the whole million because you're still gonna have to do.
And I remember when we went through that analysis with the original stadium, the maintenance cost for a field and those things. I guess what I was thinking was if that became more of a competition venue as opposed to practice venue, protect wear and tear on the grass by shifting more of that up to the upper fields. But in the scheme of the project,
It's not going to change the overall
No,
scope
no.
sufficiently enough to reduce it. The second option, oh, I'm sorry, John.
Yeah, just the question about the annex site improvements of the primary school and storage facility. So are these numbers in here based on,
2028, so
Okay.
they have the escalator. You can see in the far right column what the cost was originally
Right.
projected to be in 2024.
so if we wait 4 years, it's another $600,000?
Correct.
Good,
Depending on the bid structure and going out to market and anything that changes, but right now they've built in at least 5% increases annually based upon conversations in the construction.
but yeah, so again, then depending on where we are, if we could decide in 2026, that's what we want to do. And so these are just numbers in here.
They're estimates to the best of the working knowledge of the architects and the work that they do on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you.
Board option number 2 is the exciting one that we get to preview tonight. So we have not talked about this publicly. We've been working on this for the better part of 3.5, 4 weeks to make sure it could actually work and then begin partnership conversations. So option number 2 is a phase 1, phase 2, just like the first one. However, the maximum project cost is $135 million with full partnership for the Swickard Woods Boulevard development that would specifically happen for infrastructure purposes on the intersection and roadway improvements and the baseball, softball redesign for a relocated complex. So we have been actively talking to partners, both at the city and at the New Albany company, seeking candidly at the bottom of this table, $14,263,200 is currently the estimate to try to get this project down to $135 million. Why is that important? $135 million is the magic number to equal the roll-off of the 1.45 mils of the community authority. So if we can get to a $135 million total project cost, the net impact to taxpayers will be zero. We would ask them to continue paying what they've been paying in relationship to the community authority law. So the value is $135 million. The way we get to $135 million is we need partners for plus or minus $14 million to come to the table and help us reduce the total cost of the projects to equal no more than $135 million so that we can go to our taxpayers and say it's a no new tax increase. We would be spending the 1.45 mil valuation of the roll-off, which is $135 million. I will be honest, and I've said this to a few of you in our conversations over the last week. In my 35 years in public education, I can't name a single school district anywhere that I've ever read about or in Ohio that has ever gone to their voters to say, we're going to do a bond issue valued at $135 million and it won't increase your taxes. We would be asking you to pay the amount of money that's rolling off December 31st, 2023 and continue paying that, or 2024, excuse me, and continue paying that beginning January 1st, 2024. 25, excuse me. I'm still in 23, 24, which is 2025. It's exciting. It's taken a lot of work to get to this, but in our conversations with the architects and then internally amongst the administrative team, we feel confident that we can achieve this if our partners come through. So we have been diligently working with them. Debbie and John have been present in meetings as the city liaison and as board president, specifically with the partners in our formal asks. We have made the formal asks to both entities, and we are anxiously awaiting a formal notification of what they're willing to do for us in the formal partnership. Debbie or John, do you want to add anything to that based upon our discussion?
I mean, since nothing is finalized at this point,
Well,
it's all a request. The only thing I would say is that the history that we have of being good partners and working together continues. And it's that working relationship that we've had that has enabled us to do this. I mean, just thinking about the collaboration in the planning of what the school district looks like now that started 30 years ago with these same partners. And the process of working together, doing the bond issues that we have that will eventually be rolling off. The community authority, which part of that was actually enacted to help pay for school buildings, right? That's rolling off. That thoughtful planning is got us 30 years into the future, which is getting us here right now to the point where we are ready to make that 2.0 campus, and we're set right back up to do it again. So that's been, I think, one of the things that's been exciting for me through this whole process is the recognition by everyone involved that it's been good planning that's got us here, and that we've got a good plan here now that's going to get us into the future. The other thing that I guess I would say that, should all of this come together, we've talked so much about what the new campus would mean, but the potential of what might happen with these projects that we're asking the community to support will have some pretty tremendous impact on the community at large. This isn't something that just they're doing for the school. I mean, they're doing it for the school if they do it, but it has huge community benefit as well that everyone who lives here will have the chance to benefit from in the future. So I'm excited about the possibility of what we're able to do here, and to be able to do it in a way that, again, is a no net new tax on our taxpayers, I think is just tremendous. And we're just really excited about it.
So the difference in option number 2 is you take out the baseball field and you take out Swicker Woods Boulevard. It reduces the November ask to $75,997,200. We can't exceed 75 million, so there's still work there that we're going to do in the course of the next 2 weeks.
The November ask stays either 135 million or 150 million,
Right.
but it reduces the phase 1 to 75 million.
Right. So we still have some work to do to get to that final number, but we're in the ballpark. And then the do not ask column stayed the same. So we've just moved things around, but this is dependent upon the partnership. We cannot get to 135 million without partnership, and that's where we're at. And I believe we'll have an answer prior to your July 23rd board meeting based upon the discussions with the partners, because tonight Becky will explain the resolutions of necessity to you that we will be taking action upon to go to the auditor of state. And then one of those will become the action item on July 23rd for the resolution to proceed. So based upon all the work that we've done in the course of the campus master plan, we're presenting 2 options to you this evening that will formalize into resolutions of necessity One for $150 million that has a net tax increase of 0.55 mils. And the second for 135 million for no new tax increase, for a net zero tax increase to the taxpayer, with the continuation of the 1.45 mil roll-off that would occur in December of 2024.
And you have to pass both of those resolutions of necessity in order for one of them to move forward. If you don't pass a resolution of necessity, so for instance, if you were like, we're not gonna do the 150 million, if you don't pass that as an option and our partners aren't able to do what we're asking them, then you don't have that as an option on July 23rd. That's why you're doing both of those.
The resolutions of necessity that you would be asked to vote upon this evening are not binding. They don't mean anything is going to happen other than sending them to the auditor to get verification of the information that's required for you to then have the option to do a resolution to proceed on July 23rd. All of that is necessary prior to an August 7th filing deadline. So if you do not file prior to August 7th, you are not permitted by law to be on the November 2024 election ballot.
So one thing I want to add to what John said is when we shared this plan with our community partners, New Albany Company and the city, they were blown away by it. They were so excited. They thought this was an incredible vision for the future. And when we talked to them about the $14 million gap we need to fill in terms of a no new taxes ask, they were excited to help us too. So we will have more news to share shortly, but we have a lot of confidence in our community partners, and it was great to hear their excitement for this phase 2 vision for the campus. It's exciting for the whole community.
Are there other questions that we can answer in relationship to the projects and how we structure them into the two options? Or if there's anything else you want to know specifically about the projects that Mike can answer, if we don't know, but we've been working very well together to do this work. And we think we're in a really great place that tonight you get the two options that show to where Debbie and John both went. The future of our school district, but at the same time, addressing the current capacity needs on our school campus. So we're planning for today to fix issues that are currently transpiring across the school campus and looking future forward to plan for tomorrow. So we believe the two-phased approach can work based upon the financial benefit to the taxpayer. It's the perfect storm coming together to where John went, that this is 30 plus years ago. Now coming forward, the original high school campus was built through the community authority that's rolling off. And here's an opportunity again to invest into the future within our community and invest in our students by doing what was basically imagined over 30 years ago in our community. It's pretty incredible.
Can you remind me what is our balance in PI right now?
With the transfer that you just approved in June, we're at almost $12 million.
And these projects that we have listed as being PI are over what time frame?
We haven't decided that.
Okay.
I would say you're not doing them all at one time because then you would completely obliterate the permanent improvement fund, and I don't think that's what we want to do.
Some of them can be grouped together. So there's a relationship between some of them that could be actually a cost savings when they would go out for bid purposes. That's something we would discuss with the architects because there really is a value proposition that could happen in that entire procedure when they would go out for the bid process to see what the value could be by grouping certain things together based upon the type of work. That's fair, Mike?
So for example, the middle school stadium,
That's in phase 1. That's not PI.
I know, but the practice fields are PI. So it's potential that the work they're doing on the site
Yes.
could,
Be related to a PI project
Right.
at the top, correct?
Yeah.
Or the annex work could be related to the primary school infrastructure improvements on all the things that would happen for the roadway. So the architects would tell us how to group things to try to to incur the greatest cost savings to the school district that could be potentially imagined through the bid process. That's why we have our.
Yep.
Again, they're probably not all happening in 2026. They're gonna be phased over time.
Given the plan as we're considering it now for millage options, does that change the millage chart that you had prepared, I think for the last meeting, part of the slide deck?
So Michael has another, chart that he's gonna put up. I
Okay.
think this was at the last. They're all running together. Basically, you have it, he handed it out to you. It's got maroon at the top, says Albany Clinical School Summary of Millage Model Requested Estimates. So basically, the first two are the 135 million and the 150 million in two phases. 2025, March of 25 would be the first issuance of bonds, either 75 million or 90 million. And then 2028 would be the next issuance, either that would be about $60 million or 50, depending on what we approve. And so basically the 135 million in two phases is no net increase. So we're asking voters to continue to pay that 1.45 mils community authority that's rolling off. The ballot language will say 4.46 mils. The reason the ballot issue will say that is because the auditor's office is looking at $135 million, all issued at the same time with level debt payments, which is not what we're going to do. The $150 million in two phases is additional 5.55 mils, and the ballot language millage would be 4.95 mils. Then if we're looking at, we just put it on this chart, we don't expect that this is something we want to do, but just so you understand what the implication is, 135 million, if you did it all at one time, it's an increase of 2.05 mils, and the $150 million all in one phase would be 2.55 mil increase. We're not recommending those options 3 and 4, but just so that you understand what is the difference and why would we split it up in phases, it's really the tax. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess one of the benefits of that chart that was in that other, that it had a collection year out through, I think, 2050, 2051. And it showed the fluctuation in the bond debt, I guess.
I think that stays the same because we had them do this based on 150 million. I don't remember if we did it based on 135 million.
Right.
But because the first phase is still 90 million, whether it's the 150 or the 135, that initial increase is the same and your debt structure is the same.
Okay.
So where you would see the difference is in those later years when you're only issuing 40 or 50 million dollars instead of the full 60 million dollars. So it would drop off slightly faster.
Right.
But to that point, I think it's important to understand, so like even if we end up with a $150 million option, you only sell the bonds for the amount of work that you're actually going to do. The authority is given to you by passing the bond issue on the ballot. Doesn't mean you're going to sell all of it, depending on the total price of the bids that come back, the actual cost versus the estimate. So we clearly would not sell more than what we would need to do the actual cost that was received when it went out for bid package.
One of the other attractive elements of this, in addition to all the work that can get done, is I think part of the concerns that I've heard in the community about growth and the uncertainty around growth, what that looks like in all sorts of ways, right? Traffic, congestion, all of those things, is that it's difficult for people to say, this is what it's going to be like for the next 15 years, 20 years. We have an opportunity to set that in place so that particularly families who are entering the community, who have children that haven't entered our school district yet, will have some assurance that this is the way the school district is going to look over the course of my child going to school there. And I think that that's a pretty attractive benefit from the approach that's been set up now.
to Mr. Wilson's point, could you just remind me and the community, our current enrollment and where you think this will take us capacity wise if we did the 135 million?
So right now, we're just under 5,100 students on the school campus. The original campus was built for 5,500 students maximum. This actually gives us the capacity to go to 7,500 is the current projections that Mike used and all the paperwork and everything that we've done and all the projections. So we took the cooperative strategy study, looked at what's happening in the next 10 years and then what the potential is potentially for 5 years after that. So the campus could have up to 7,500 students. This actually gives us that capacity. So to Mr. Wilson's point, it is future forward. It's much like what happened 30 years ago, that it was imagined that this is what the campus will someday look like. And they put the infrastructure in over time and the schools were added based upon the continued growth. This will address current capacity issues at the elementary level, but at the same time, in phase 2, with the inclusion of the fine arts hub and the science labs, but particularly the fine arts hubs, the domino process is the science labs. It frees up 17 classrooms at the high school that then accounts for 400 more students in the future. So it's looking down the road, to your point, Mr. Newmont, to be prepared for the future. But also fixing today's reality in phase 1.
So we discussed, you know, the challenge of this message is that on the ballot, people will see either 4.46 mils or 4.95 mils, and just making sure people understand that it's really a no new taxes message or a 0.55 increase in taxes.
And we have a track record of doing that because we've done that with both of our permanent improvement levies. They would have said 1.25 mils or when we replaced it 1.75 mils, but because of things that were rolling off, the tax change was not as significant, or in the 1.25 mil case, they actually received money back.
But you're correct.
Yes.
The messaging will matter. That's where the education and the campaign will have to educate people within the community to understand that.
But it is really exciting to think about, you know, I mean, option 1, potentially no new millage and all these enhancements and improvements to the campus.
Option 1 is
That's
0.55 mil. Option 2 is no new tax.
Okay, I was looking at this.
She was looking at this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
They're flipped on the spreadsheet.
No, it's exciting. It's really exciting. I know, you know, when we first figured this out, it was a really exciting option, and hopefully we can achieve it, and we'll keep everyone posted.
Any other questions in relationship to the campus master plan, the update that I described for the new school, or the funding options based upon the spreadsheets of how we now organize the use of existing permanent improvement money, the partnership opportunity, the November bond issue for phase 1 for years 1 through 3, and the November bond issue for phases 2 for years 4 through 6. They account for 2 options that are being presented to the board tonight for action purposes through resolutions of necessity that permit you to move forward to get certification evaluation from the auditor of state specifically. The other piece, I'm just going to talk about it now because it's directly related and it is in your board action items tonight, but it's related to baseball and softball. So because we've talked about that, I want to bring it up. The relocation of baseball and softball off of school property means that the potential is that those fields could be built on a location that is not owned by the school district. We have also entered into formal conversations with the New Albany company to request the donation of land specifically for baseball and softball and the transportation facility. So we do not own property that can house the relocation of baseball and softball. We don't have any property left that's big enough, nor do we have property that's the best location for a transportation center. So in our conversations with the New Albany company, they have been very open, as they have been in the past as part of the partnership. Majority of the land for our school district has been donated previously by the New Albany company. We approached the New Albany company like we have in the past and asked them to formally consider the donation of land for baseball and softball and a transportation center. Tonight, under your board action items, there is a request to formalize that request to the New Albany Company on behalf of the Board of Education Administration through an affirmative vote of the board to basically make the formal ask in writing. So in our conversations, they've been receptive. They have asked for a formal request in writing. For us to formally request that, we need the authority of the Board of Education to ask them publicly and formally to donate land for baseball and softball, which right now we're asking for a minimum of 15 acres. We know we need at least 12 for the field, an additional acre for baseball, softball concessions, restrooms, press box, and a batting cage facility. We need no less than 13 acres. We're asking for at least 15 to be safe, based upon one of the proposed locations. And then in addition to that, the transportation center, the plot of land that has been identified as approximately 11 acres. We need about 6.5 acres for transportation. So we're making a formal request for the land associated to transportation as well. Are there any questions about the land?
Is it, we're making a formal request and
For consideration.
For consideration.
For a formal donation to the school district for land.
correct. And I guess just for, so that people's minds don't wander too far. And again, nothing that we could specifically say because it has to be the partners that choose the property, but we're also not talking about, or we're not going to request that they give us a piece of property for baseball fields that are out in the middle of nowhere. It's going to be impossible.
We're asking for land that is actually very proximal to the school district, both for baseball and softball and for transportation. So they're centrally located and would be extremely beneficial to the school district. But I don't honestly want to say where because it's not under our control.
Correct.
I do know the locations, but it's up to them to decide that is going to happen.
I was gonna bring up the same point because the baseball parents are concerned about, can kids get there without a car?
Yes, the location that's been identified is a very desirable piece of property that will fit very well into servicing the needs of our kids because it is proximal to the school district in many ways. I know that sounds like double speak, I'm sorry.
No,
I don't
it's
think
good,
we
it's
have the
good.
right to divulge where
No.
until they say yes.
Right. But
It's close.
right, and again, this just goes to I hope people appreciate the level of partnership and frankly, the generosity should they choose to do this because
Well, I can tell you the piece of land that we're requesting for baseball currently, because I know the value of it, we do have that back, is $5.6 million for baseball and softball. The 15 acres of property is worth $5.6 million on today's market. We are extremely hopeful that we get that piece of property. I do not have the value for the transportation property. It has not come back.
significant investment either way.
Yes. Well, the entire school campus has been a significant investment on behalf of the community. Any other questions that Becky or I can answer, or anything specific you would like from Mike architecturally?
Thanks for coming again, Mike.
So President Kalinowski, we blended communications to the board, letters A, B, and C.
Yep.
And then kind of led into 5B for campus master plan and funding discussion with the board. So I apologize, but we kind of put it all together.
No, that's good. So we'll move into discussion items. Beginning with board liaison reports. Do we have any reports this evening?
The financial committee RFP met and we went over some of the options they were presented with, kind of the four that are on the table. And the people who are at the meeting were supportive of 1 and 2, the two options of the 2 phases of the project. Not going forward with asking all of it at once. have a 2 mil increase on taxpayers. So there wasn't really any questions or concerns from the members of the committee or afterwards between the meeting and now. I haven't received anything back.
It's great to have them as a resource. Thank you, Jen.
Yep.
Any other board liaison?
Township trustees meet on Wednesday. They have been met most recently last Friday. Was it? Last Friday, I'm pretty sure. As in a working session, and it was very helpful to attend because there was a lot of good discussion by the trustees and the town manager and the fire department about exactly what they need. And I think it's fair to say that they're going about it in a very deliberate and measured way. And just like we are having to take some actions, formal actions, they will be in the same position over this next week or so, I
They
guess.
have the same deadline.
Yeah, so I'll plan on being at the meeting again on Wednesday night to support them.
Thank you. Okay, next is board policy, Superintendent Sawyers.
President Kalinowski, members of the Board of Education, there are 12 policies presented tonight for first reading. I'm going to group them into 5 categories to talk about them. So the first 2 policies are 2623 and 2623.02, specifically related to student assessments and academic intervention services. The changes that are being proposed by Neola are coming out of the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. That's the first one, is that the state has officially changed the name from the Ohio Department of Education to the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. So that's been mirrored in all the policy changes, and you will continue to see that in every policy that comes up that has anything in it that formally references the Ohio Department of Education. In addition to that, they've updated the language on state mandated definitions for state testing that tie back to the 3rd grade guarantee as well. So they have gone through and actually updated the language based upon the new rules that have been adopted either in revised code 33010715 or from the department to specifically define what's happening with the 3rd grade guarantee and the assessment protocols that are required specifically for students that are required to sit for the exam. The next grouping is 3140, 4124, and 4140. These deal with employees. So the 3000 series are the non-teaching employees are the certified employees within the school district. The 4000 series is the non-teaching employees within the school district. These deal with actually finally updating the policies to reflect today's practice. It used to be that everything had to go through US mail or US certified mail. They've now updated the language to actually account for email with proof of delivery or other methods with proof of delivery that can incorporate like UPS, FedEx, or other types of venues that you could use beyond what would be traditionally just US mail. So those updates have occurred in the personnel section specifically. In the 5000 series under 5310, they've added a title change specifically to update the language to call it concussion. So there are concussion protocols that are specifically required for interscholastic sports. For participation purposes, they've actually defined that by actually changing the header and actually using the word concussion. And then the second piece is to incorporate a change in Ohio Revised Code related to the provision associated to feminine hygiene products. They are now required to be provided to students in school in grades 6 through 12 under Ohio Revised Code. They have to be accessible. The school district determines the how, but it is a requirement now that they must be accessible in all school buildings to all students in grades 6 through 12. At no cost. That is a unfunded mandate technically. The school district is responsible. There was a grant that was provided for the first year. Hereafter, it will become a school district expense to make sure that products are available to our students. The next series is transportation related. So 8600, 8600.04, 8640, 8650, and 8660. I talked about the department name change. So that's throughout this policy. The other pieces that are incorporated are definitions for vehicles. So it's vehicles and vehicles other than school buses. So school buses have been dominantly used as the language. The Department of Education and Workforce has updated that language to talk about other vehicles because cars, vans, and other types of vehicles are used to transport students beyond the school bus. particularly for students that are being served through special education services. It could be an out-of-district placement. They may be a single student being transported to a school building off of school property. So that doesn't require the use of a school bus. So the department's now updated all the rules to basically incorporate that. At the same time, they also incorporated the changes in the driver's license requirement. To drive a school bus, you must have a CDL, a commercial driver's license. To drive a vehicle other than a school bus, like a car or a van, you have to have a driver's license. You still go through the normal hiring protocols, all the background checks and everything that we do as a school district. But we actually have the ability to hire you as a van driver using a regular driver's license and not being in possession of a commercial driver's license because you have no aspiration to ever drive the big yellow taxi we call a school bus. The last one is 5,500. This was actually brought to our attention by Mr. Wilson. It's in the Student Code of Conduct. It's language clarification towards the end of the policy. The paragraph in Rule 25, honestly, didn't make much sense. So it's been reworded to account for repeated violations of the Student Code of Conduct and the disciplinary action that can be taken in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the policies, or Mrs. Fuller, as the board liaison, could probably assist me as well. Question?
All right. Next on our agenda is an opportunity for public participation. And with no participants, we will move into board items. So for each item, I will be asking for a motion and a second and then roll call. The first item A is state consents and special needs approval to issue bonds for the school district in the amount not to exceed $150 million and to submit the question of such bond issue to the electors.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. McClelland and Mr. Newmoff, Ms. Jenkins.
So this is because we could issue up to $84 million in additional debt and stay under our 4% limit. And it's 4%, but not less than 9% of your tax valuation. When you go over that 4%, you have to ask permission to do that from the Department of Education and Workforce and the Ohio Department of Education. So this resolution is kind of like the resolutions of necessity. We're going to pass those, send them to those departments. I see no reason, our legal counsel sees no reason that they won't say yes to that. But that's the reason that you're passing this resolution tonight.
Are there any questions? Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. McClellan?
Yes.
Vice President Newmaw?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller? Yes. Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
President Kalinowski?
Yes, and the motion carries. Next is item B, the resolution of necessity of bond issue in the amount of $135 million and to submit the question of such bond issue to the electors. May I have a motion and a second for this agenda item, please?
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Fuller and Mr. McClelland, Ms. Jenkins.
So this is the first of the two resolutions of necessity that we talked about. This is for the $135 million. Again, we plan on doing it in 2 phases, so it'll have the tax implications that we discussed, but it has to go forward as just $135 million to the Franklin County auditors. Franklin County auditor will then confirm what is the millage amount for the number of years at the estimated interest rate.
Are there any questions? With none, Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Ms. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. McClellan?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Vice President Newmaw?
Yes.
President Kalinowski?
Yes, and the motion carries. Next is item C, the resolution of necessity of bond issue in the amount of $150 million and to submit the question of such bond issue to the electors. May I have a motion and a second for this agenda item, please?
So moved.
Second. Mr. Wilson and Ms. Fuller, Ms. Jenkins.
Again, this is the second of the 2 resolutions of necessity that will move forward to the Franklin County Auditor's Office for them to verify and confirm what the millage will be given interest rates and number of years.
Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Ms. Fuller. Yes. Mr. McClellan.
Yes.
Vice President Newmaw.
Yes.
President Kalinowski.
Yes, and the motion carries. Next is item D, the request for land donations. May I have a motion and a second for this agenda item, please?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Newmoff and Mr. McClellan. Ms. Jenkins.
Michael already spoke to this, but this is just giving, Debbie, Michael and I authority to work on a letter to formally ask NACO for donation of land.
Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Vice President Newmaw.
Yes.
Mr. McClellan.
Yes.
Ms. Fuller.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
President Kalinowski.
Yes, and the motion carries. Now may I have a motion and a second for superintendent items A and B, please?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Newmoff and Mr. McClellan, Superintendent Sawyers.
President Kalinowski, members of the Board of Education, letter A for personnel or standard employee action items as we continue to prepare for the 2024-25 school year. We are accepting resignations for some employees that have elected not to return beginning in August to serve our students. But at the same time, welcoming replacements that are currently being hired as we continue to try to staff for 2024-25. Mrs. Lofton, the directors and all of our building administration are doing a phenomenal job. We are not done yet. We still have positions to fill, but we are making significant progress. Letter B for general business, I'm going to call your attention just to payment in lieu of because I get asked this question occasionally. So there are some students that are ruled impractical to transport. The payment is made in arrears. So there are students that appear on tonight's agenda that received, could have received transportation eligibility services within the school district. We declared them impractical to transport based upon the reasons in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code. The families then submit to the school district to receive a payment in lieu of transportation that's currently valued at
Yeah.
so that's the answer. I forgot it. I drew a blank. To receive that in payment in lieu of the transportation services they could have been eligible for within the school district because we declared them impractical to transport. Happy to answer any questions about the agenda items.
Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Vice President Newmaw.
Yes.
Mr. McClellan.
Yes.
Ms. Fuller. Yes. Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
President Kalinowski.
Yes, and the motion carries. That brings us to adjournment for this evening. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Mr. Wilson and Mr. McClellan. Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. McClellan.
Yes.
Ms. Fuller. Yes. Vice President Newmaw.
Yes.
President Kalinowski.
Yes, and the motion carries. Our next meeting is on Tuesday, July 23rd at 5:30 at this location. Thank you very much.